And it's my honor today to introduce one of those special guests to you today. Congressman Steve King has served Iowa in Congress since 2002. Before that, he was in the state Senate, where I first got the chance to meet with him, work with him. He was a small businessman, took a small construction company and built it himself. He and his wife, Marilyn, been married for over 38 years, and they attend the St. Martin's Church in Odebolt. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest today, Congressman Steve King.
Thank you, John. Thanks very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, thank you all very much. Thanks for the invitation to be here this morning, to join you in worship, and to say a few words here this morning in remembrance of 9/11. There's so many images that flash before my mind, and I'm sure they've flashed before your mind, and many of us look back on where we were 10 years ago. I watched the Remembrance ceremony this morning at Ground Zero, and some of you did that while you were getting ready to come here this morning. I want to get this part off of my chest because I don't want to end up on a down note. But as I watched that ceremony this morning, and we all by now have discussed this for a week or better, that Mayor Bloomberg denied prayer at the Remembrance ceremony at Ground Zero. And we know, and we listened to Pastor Jeff this morning tell us that the Lord has said to us that if we seek His face and humble ourselves before Him and turn from our wicked ways and pray, that He will heal our land. And that's what we have been doing here for the last 10 years and more. I have stood and looked down upon that gaping hole at Ground Zero with smoke billowing up out of it. I recall standing next to a man whom I'd never met, and he had no idea that I was a member of Congress, and I didn't know who he was. But he began to narrate for me the story of that day, September 11th, for him. His name was Rich Benedetti, and he was a security officer at Merrill Lynch, the building that was right next to Ground Zero. And he told me the story of where people went outside to look at the Twin Towers burning, and they did everything they could to get people inside the building. But those that refused to come in, that wouldn't take the directive, were trapped outside, and all of them were killed, as were everyone on the airplanes and many in the Twin Towers. And that agony that came out of his voice that day as we looked down into that gaping hole at Ground Zero echoes back to me as another component of the price that this nation has paid. And I look back also on the Friday after September 11th, in our little school, Odebolt Arthur. It's a little rural school. It has about 504 students from K through 12. And America was shocked and gripped in this. And so on the Friday after that Tuesday of September 11th, our superintendent, and he said he invited in all of the pastors from our area, which turns out to be 7. We're not that big, you know. And but in any case, he invited them all into the gymnasium, invited the entire community, and so in came the kindergartners, the grade schoolers, the middle schoolers, the high schoolers, all came in and sat down in the bleachers in the gymnasium, and the parents and the people in the community all came in and filled up the gymnasium, and they began a prayer service in the public school to pray for our country, to heal our land. Each pastor stepped up and offered a prayer and a reading, and in the conclusion, my pastor stepped up and asked everyone to join hands for the Lord's Prayer. I asked the superintendent if it would be okay if I told that narrative out in public, and he said, yes, I did the right thing. Brings me back to what I wondered when I was a freshman in high school when they passed the Murray v. Curlett decision that took prayer out of the public school. And I wondered, what will they do if we continue to pray in our schools? Are they going to lock the doors, send the military in to tell us that we can't? There's a certain place for a little civil disobedience. And today I'm troubled by seeing the services at Ground Zero. The President of the United States, President Bush, who was our president at that time, each of them had short little scripted places, and they're reading each name. And it's appropriate to read each name, but it's also appropriate to add more minutes onto the service so that they can stop and not only have a moment of silence as Mayor Bloomberg asked for, but to bow their heads and to pray and ask the Lord to heal our land. We are a Christian nation, and on some of these occasions I will broaden that to a Judeo-Christian nation, and we are. And we cannot forget that. I'm watching these services today. It troubles me because the culture of America is Christian. Everybody's not a Christian in America. 85% or so say they are, perhaps a number larger than that. And yet we have a Christian culture. And this culture embraces Christianity. One of those times that brought me back to a piece of this reality was when I was doing a radio program with Alan Colmes, who is one of the most difficult people that you ever have to debate with on a telephone radio. And he was excoriating me because I introduced a resolution that honored Christ at Christmas, because he said this is not a Christian nation. And we went around and around for 15 or 20 minutes, and finally I said, Alan, whatever your religion might be, even you will conduct yourself as a Christian. You just don't realize you are, but you will. Well, you've got to really push it in to get it there on Alan. And so he said, how's that? And I said, it's like this. If you drive home tonight and you turn in your driveway and the neighbor's dog has gotten out and runs over the wheel, under the wheel of your car, and you kill your neighbor's dog, the first thing you will do if you're any kind of a man is you will go knock on your neighbor's door, and when he comes to the door, you'll say to him, I just killed your dog. Alan, that's called confession. The next thing you'll say is, I'm sorry. Alan, that's called repentance. And you'll say, I didn't mean to. And you'll ask him to forgive you, and that's also follows right through with the Christian faith. Please forgive me. And your neighbor will look at you, he will listen, he will say, Alan, it wasn't your fault, you didn't mean to. You are forgiven. Alan, that's called redemption. This is a Christian nation, and it's a nation that must pray and humble ourselves before God and seek his face and turn from our wicked ways and ask the Lord to heal our land. And I look back on those times from those 10 years ago, and I think where I was when I got the first news, driving up to the Clay County Fair. And I got a call from my wife, and she said, turn on the radio, a plane has just struck one of the Twin Towers in New York City. I turned on the radio, and as we listened, my passenger that day was Bob Varner, a Korean War veteran who was young enough to remember the Japanese attack in December of 1941. And within a few minutes, the news came on that a second plane had hit the Twin Towers. And the first words out of either one of our mouths came from Bob Varner, the Korean veteran. He said, Pearl Harbor. Those two words characterized the attack on this country better than any two words that I've heard since then, and framed in my mind forever how this unfolded. And I stood there that day at the Clay County Fair, and I counted and watched as 70 to 90 people were clustered around the televisions that were part of the display. And there was a somber, serious, heavy load to everyone that was there. They all came to do the things they needed to do, but they also stopped, and I know, as I was one of them, I stood there and prayed for our country, prayed that this country will heal itself together and that we'll be unified. And some of the images that I see in my mind's eye that have unfolded since that day 10 years ago today would be of a man standing looking back on the street when it's full of ashes, and he's covered, an African American covered with the gray soot of ashes, and one tear has washed a furrow down his cheek. Another image of the brownstones in New York, every one of them with an American flag hanging out of the brownstones. We hadn't seen that before. An America that was pulled together, it's unified together. And we are better patriots today than we were 10 years ago. God has made us stronger. We have been tested. And in some areas we are wanting, and in other areas we've gotten stronger. I've had the privilege to stand down at Clark County as every emergency worker and security worker in the county was introduced by name to be honored for protecting us. Every firefighter, every police officer, every EMT, one at a time, introduced in Clark County at Osceola. Long ways away from home for me, but burned forever in my memory, the appreciation we have for our people that keep us safe. And as these images unfold, here's another one that I promised Marie that I would mention, and that is October 5th, 10 years ago, this coming October 5th, I had found myself in the reenactment of the return of Lewis and Clark as they came back it's called the Return of the White Pirogue. It was 200 years to the day, if I have it right, as we went down the Missouri River. We were in the wild stretch of the Missouri River, that area that found itself to be multiple miles wide over this last 3 months in the floods that we had. But we were seeing the river as Lewis and Clark saw it, and a replica of the boat that they returned in. And most of the people that were on that boat were wearing buckskins, and they had black powder and all those old things like that. And as we went down that river, no one lives along there, along where the stretch where we were. There are a few cabins along the river, and even them are faced the opposite direction from the river. The river is the backyard, not the front yard, to anybody that might live along there. And as we went by a sandbar, and we were sailing along pretty fast, here was, remember, October 5th, 10 years ago, less than a month after the attack on September 11th that we remember today. And here was a piece of cottonwood driftwood about 35 feet long that had been propped up on a sandbar and other pieces of driftwood spiked to it and strapped together. This piece of driftwood was a flagpole, and Old Glory was flying proudly out in the middle of nowhere on the wild stretch of the Missouri River as a statement to the rest of the world: we will stand together. America fears not. Patriots everywhere honor Old Glory, even in a place like the wild stretch of the Missouri River. And as we went by, and I snapped one picture, and as we went by, I thought, Osama bin Laden, if you could see this, your feet would tremble in their sandals at the sight of an America that's proud, that's patriotic, that's God-loving and God-fearing, and defiant of anyone who would challenge our freedom and our liberty. And now as we look back on these days today, I've just patched a few of the images in my mind, and hopefully they've triggered some of the images in your mind. But we have to step up every day and remember that God delivered liberty to our founding fathers. With His guidance, they discovered it and they protected it, defined it, and defended it. And we have to, again, redefine it, protect it, and defend it. And some say, how can we do this? I'm tired. I don't want to go again. I don't want to get up and go charge into it again. I'm a little worn out. Well, how can you be? If God tapped you on the shoulder today, what's the first thing you should ask for if you're serving Him? Let me continue to serve you today and every day with joy, Lord. Let me serve with joy. And so when I have to reach for strength, and it happens also to me as it does the rest of you, I reach back and I ask God for that strength, and I ask Him for the measure of His wisdom that He would loan me for this day. When some of my colleagues get tired and worn out, they, why am I doing this? My answer back to them is, where can you make more difference? How can you serve any better that you can serve in this capacity you're in today? And if you're a little tired, just draw your strength from the Lord and the joy of the battle. If you do that, they can never defeat you. They will never defeat the United States of America. We will circle our wagons. We'll continue to get stronger. We'll raise our children in the right way. We'll raise them in the faith. And we will seek His face and turn from our wicked ways. And we'll humble ourselves before Him. And the Lord will bless this land. Thank you very much.